I never thought I'd be one of those people browsing the r/no-sleep subreddit at 2 a.m., but here I am, desperate and wide awake, my insatiable curiosity overpowering the palpable fear that clings to me like a damp blanket. The night started like any other. I was tucked in bed, scrolling through my phone, the glow casting unsettling shadows across my cluttered room. Despite the late hour, I found myself captivated by a thread titled "How I Learned to Overcome My Fear of the Unknown." It was a typical setup, a user sharing their experience with nightmares, growing increasingly uneasy as they dived deeper into their story. But there was something different about this one. It was chilling and pulled me into the depths of their dread. They spoke of a series of inexplicable occurrences that left them questioning their reality. As I read, a memory I had buried long ago resurfaced, igniting a flicker of unease in my stomach. Years ago, I experienced something that didn't just sit right with me, it haunted me. My family lived in an old house in the countryside, far removed from the comforts of the city. One summer evening, while my parents were busy preparing dinner, curiosity got the better of me. I ventured into the basement, the kind with creaking stairs and a door that seemed heavier with every step I took. I had heard whispers in the dark corners, tales of things that lingered there, mausoleum-like memories left behind by the previous owner, an old woman who vanished without a trace. My fearless little heart skipped a beat as I flicked on the light, revealing a haphazard collection of forgotten furniture, dust-covered bikes, and boxes that full of objects with no defined purpose. I rummaged through them, feeling a strange mix of excitement and trepidation, until I stumbled upon an ornate mirror, its surface tarnished with age. As I reached out to touch it, a chill washed over me. I can still recall that moment with clarity. My fingers brushed the mirror, and the reflection warped as if the glass were alive. A fleeting image of a woman flashed before me, the older woman who had vanished, her eyes dark pits of sorrow, beckoning me to look deeper. I recoiled, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. I made a hasty exit, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me upstairs, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. The days that followed were riddled with eeriness. Unearthly whispers filled my ears when I lay in bed, shadows danced just out of sight, and sometimes, in the midst of the night, I could swear I felt icy fingertips brushing against my neck. My parents shrugged off my fears, attributing them to an act of imagination. But I knew the truth. There was something in the house, something hungry and waiting in the darkness. I attempted to forget about the mirror, but it was impossible. Whenever I ventured near the basement, dread cloaked me like a shroud. One night, driven by an uncontrollable urge to confront my fear, I descended the stairs once more. The air was thick with dust and something else, a lingering presence that made my skin prickle. The mirror stood there, glowing faintly in the dim light, its surface reflecting nothing but shadows. I stepped closer, compelled, fighting the fear that wrapped around my heart. And then I heard it, a soft murmuring beyond comprehension. It resonated through the dark, an echo from a distant realm. Summoning every ounce of courage, I placed my hand against the glass again, and the world around me shifted. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of voices, all pleading, warning, and weeping. I could see the old woman again, her hand reaching out from the depths of the mirror, a harbinger of sorrow and despair. I was frozen in place, feeling her energy seep into me, the frigid weight of the unknown pressing down. But that night, instead of retreating, I pushed further into the depths of the mirror, whispering the words I had heard her voice conjure. I can't remember the exact incantation, but I could see the shimmer, swirling colors pulling me into an abyss. It felt timeless, as if I were suspended in a void, and then I was in. I experienced moments of agony, suspended between memories that weren't my own, reliving scenes from the woman's life, the moment she had disappeared into the mirror. The confusion twisted my mind, and I was left feeling like a wanderer in a land where reality had no dominion. It was here, in the belly of the unknown, that I felt my fear transform. The weight of it shifted, becoming something I could wield. I was not just a spectator, I was part of something greater. I began to empathize with the silhouette of the woman trapped in the glass. Her fears were mine, and her longing for freedom echoed in my soul. I whispered words of comfort, and the air crackled with tension before exploding back into clarity. I jumped back from the mirror, breathing hard, terrified and exhilarated. I was changed. Little by little, I found ways to step outside my comfort zone. I started small, with confronting shadows lurking in the corners of my mind. I challenged the boundaries I'd set around myself, the constraints of conformity that had tethered me not just to the fears of the unknown but to the comforts that easily became prisons. I began traveling, I sought out new experiences, put myself in situations quite deliberately where unexpected things could unfold. Each time I confronted a fear, whether standing on the edge of a towering cliff or diving into the ocean for the first time, I saw glimpses of the old woman. I carried her energy, her wisdom and agony with me, and slowly I transformed her pain into strength. It was hard to let go of that fear, but I embraced the unknown as a cosmic dance rather than a monster waiting to ensnare me. Over time, I learned that the fear of the unknown only gives it power, and when confronted with an open heart, it can lead to transcendent experiences. Finally, I feel like I've transformed into a version of myself that can truly forge ahead. Fear has become an ally guiding me rather than chaining me down. And so, here I am, sharing this story with you, hoping that if you're like me, struggling to reject the comforts of the known and fight the primal instincts that scream to retreat, you'll understand how to evolve that fear into survival, into exploration, and into strength. Embrace it, because in doing so, you may just discover something profoundly beautiful waiting in the dark. It was a dark and stormy night when I first stumbled upon the truth. I know that sounds cliché, but you'll understand soon enough why it matters. I had been chasing my dream of becoming a writer since I could remember, pouring my soul into stories, hoping to one day see my name on a bestseller list. The thrill of creating fictional worlds and the sheer joy of crafting intricate plots swept me away, but it was never enough. I was living paycheck to paycheck, working a dead-end job in a coffee shop just to afford the rent on my tiny studio. Every day, I'd scrawl thoughts into my battered notebook during my lunch breaks, dreaming of the day my words would jump off the page and resonate with others. I'd submit short stories to magazines, but rejection letters filled my inbox, often leaving me feeling more discouraged than before. Still, I pressed on because I believed one day I would create a masterpiece. One night, while aimlessly scrolling through a writer's forum, I discovered a thread titled "The Dark Side of Writing." Intrigued, I dove in, reading post after post filled with tragic tales of failed authors, backstabbing agents, and cursed manuscripts. One user, an ominous figure who went by the Watcher, posted a message that sent a chill down my spine. They claimed that the secret to success in the writing world lay not in talent or hard work, but in a ritual that could unlock unparalleled creativity. Curious and desperate, I clicked on their profile and found a personal blog that detailed their experience with this ritual. The Watcher described a ceremony involving an ancient text called the manuscript, said to summon muses but requiring a high price, your very connection to reality. I was skeptical, of course. But the idea gnawed at me until I couldn't shake it. What if this was the key to what I needed? The last rejection letter I received had pushed me to the edge. I was tired of failing. I wanted to succeed at any cost, so I decided to look for the manuscript. After nights of searching through various obscure second-hand bookstores and hidden corners of the internet, I finally found a seller who claimed to have it. The website was buried under pages of search results, a clear sign it was no ordinary book. When the package arrived, my heart raced. The wrapping was old, worn like it had been through some bizarre adventure of its own. The cover had faded symbols that seemed to pulse under the dim light of my apartment. I took it as a sign I had found something special. That night, I gathered supplies, a candle, a small bowl of salt, and a grimoire. I followed the instructions meticulously, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. I recited the incantation, feeling words surge through me, wrapping around my mind and filling me with the promise of creativity beyond my wildest dreams. The lights flickered as I uttered the final words, and I felt the air grow thick with energy. Suddenly, the candle blew out, plunging my tiny room into darkness. My heart raced, and I felt a presence, almost tangible, in the room with me. The writing muse had arrived, or so I thought. I could hear whispers, the echoes of countless voices intertwining with my thoughts. It all started to blur. The lines between my desires and their reality twisted impossibly. I fell into a deep sleep, a dreamless abyss that seemed to stretch for ages. When I woke up, it was morning. My first thought was to check my notebook, but something felt wrong. I flipped open the pages to discover they were filled with scrawled sentences that didn't belong to me, stories I never wrote, characters I never created. I rushed to my laptop and found dozens of documents with titles I didn't recognize. I read through page after page of brilliantly crafted prose, mind-boggling plots, and unforgettable characters I clearly did not conceive. It was exhilarating but terrifying. I was elated to discover these stories existed, but I had no memory of creating them. I began to share these stories online, initially claiming they were my own. They received immediate attention, and soon enough, I was receiving offers from publishers. My dream was finally coming true, but the entire time, a small voice nagged at the back of my mind, a whisper of doubt. After a few months, I found myself at a local literary festival, standing at a booth dedicated to my now published works. I smiled for the camera, waved to fans who wanted autographs, but I felt hollow inside. A lurking emptiness began to consume me. I had given up pieces of myself without even realizing it. One night, I couldn't sleep, the weight of this growing unease pressed hard against my chest. I flipped through the pages of the manuscript, searching for answers, clues, anything. But as I read, my heart dropped. The final pages, the ones with the instructions for the ritual, weren't anywhere to be found. I felt panicked, like I had dropped my lifeline into a void. Desperate for clarity, I reached out to the watcher through the forum, begging for advice. Days passed with no reply, and my anxiety turned into a spiral of paranoia. What if I had unleashed something dark within myself? I began to read the stories I had written for days, trying to find a hint or a signal. Then I discovered something chilling. The protagonists in these stories were eerily similar to people I knew. Friends, co-workers, even family were woven into the narratives, but not as heroes. They were tortured shadows, reflecting their dark sides and insecurities. I felt sick. It was almost as if this entity, this muse I had summoned, didn't just gift me stories, it wanted to destroy them, to consume their essence through my words. I tried to write my own story again, but nothing came. I sat in front of the blank page for hours, writing and deleting over and over again, my own voice drowned out by the murmurs of the narratives already created. My pen trembled in fear as I felt it navigate toward darker themes that weren't mine but were pulled from the nether. I realized I was no longer chasing the dream I had envisioned, I was being puppeteered by my demons, and my imagination had become a prison. I had to put an end to it. So, I decided to confront the watcher on the writing forum. I posted a direct message, pleading for help and warning others about the manuscript. The response was swift, unexpected. A user named Read102 wrote, "You've dug too deep, haven't you? The stories are not yours to own. Burn it. You must burn the manuscript before it claims more than you realize." I felt a rush of cold air as the realization set in. The ritual wasn't merely a trick but a binding, trapping my identity and amplifying my fears. I gathered the courage, my heart racing, and raced back to my apartment. The moment I held the book in my hands again, I felt the tug of something sinister, a connection I wasn't ready to sever. But nothing mattered, I had to destroy it. With shaking hands, I doused it in lighter fluid and set it aflame outside my apartment. As it burned, I felt pieces of myself slip away in the smoke. I hadn't just given up my dreams, I had surrendered my reality to a darker ambition. The flames flickered and danced before finally collapsing in on themselves. The fire was consuming the book, but as it disintegrated, I heard grim whispers echoing around me. "You can't escape us." I recoiled, my heart pounding as an icy breeze enveloped me, chill whispering in my ear. The moment I realized I was chasing the wrong dream wasn't when I burnt the manuscript, but when I glimpsed the shadows creeping at the edges of my mind, reminding me that ambition can sometimes lead you to places where the price is far too steep. I wish I could say it ended there, that I walked away unscathed, but the shadows still linger. Life moved on, but those stories, those characters, they have a way of seeping back into my thoughts. I'm still writing, but never again with the same fervor. Now, I look over my shoulder, and every night I can feel the whispers haunt me, taunting me, waiting to see if I'll ever come back from my abandoned dreams. Make sure you choose your ambitions wisely. The moment you realize you're chasing the wrong dream can turn into a nightmare. I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am, sitting in my dimly lit living room, the flickering light of my laptop casting strange shadows along the walls. I can hardly believe what happened a few months ago, and I still don't know if I'm more terrified or grateful for the experience that transformed my entire existence. It was a chilly evening when I first noticed the strange advertisement. It was an unassuming flyer, barely fluttering in the wind, plastered on the bulletin board at the corner cafe I frequented. It simply read, "Embrace Change Workshop, transform your life, limited seats available." I laughed it off as yet another gimmick but couldn't shake the feeling that something about it pulled at me. Maybe it was the monotony of my life that had begun to gnaw at me, or perhaps I was just curious. After days of wrestling with my thoughts, I finally decided to call the number printed below. The voice on the other end was smooth and inviting, and I felt an odd sense of comfort as I shared my struggles of feeling trapped in a routine that no longer served me. "You're ready for a change," she said, and I thought about how much I wanted to agree with her, how much I wanted to believe that was true. With a mix of excitement and dread, I signed up for the workshop, not knowing that it would turn my life upside down. The first session took place in a small, dimly lit room filled with mismatched chairs and a faint smell of incense that hung in the air. I remember feeling a tingle of uncertainty as I entered, spotting a group of participants who looked just as lost and desperate for change as I was. The leader, a woman with intense eyes and an almost ethereal presence named Mara, introduced the concept of embracing the unknown. "You have to let the old version of yourself die to give birth to a new one," she proclaimed, and I felt chills spike down my spine, yet I was drawn in. Over the next few weeks, I was subjected to various bizarre exercises. We danced in circles, burned symbolic images of our past, even faced our greatest fears in imaginative scenarios. I started to change in subtle ways, my clothing became brighter, my thoughts less negative, but it all came to a head one fateful evening. Mara announced we would undertake a night walk through the woods behind the center, a journey she claimed would force us to confront our deepest fears. I hesitated but reminded myself that embracing change required courage. As we stepped into the cool embrace of darkness, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The forest beckoned, its shadows whispering secrets long buried. I walked alongside the others, their nervous laughter echoing through the trees. We reached a clearing nestled between the towering oaks, and there Mara instructed us to stand in a circle, holding hands. She told us to close our eyes and envision what we feared most. The silence felt oppressive, thick enough to cut with a knife. As I stood there, eyes shut, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. My heart raced. I felt it, breath on my neck, a presence behind me. Something instinctual within me screamed to open my eyes, but instead, I focused on my fear. A pair of hands grasped my shoulders harshly, and I nearly screamed when Mara's voice cut through the veil of darkness. "What do you see?" I took a breath, forced myself to respond, and in that moment, the floodgates opened. I felt my old insecurities, my fears of inadequacy, the sense that I never belonged, all rise to the surface. "I see a ghost," I whispered, my voice trembling. Mara continued probing, guiding me deeper into this abyss where I confronted my past, failed relationships, lost opportunities, a life unlived. The ghost morphed into familiar faces, people who hurt me or who I felt let me down. Yet as I faced them, I felt something strange rising within me. There was anger, yes, but also a sense of relief. Maybe it was the group's energy, but in that moment, I realized that the past was over. I screamed, releasing everything in a primal way I never knew I needed to. The echo rebounded off the trees, carrying my pain away. When I opened my eyes, the night felt different, everything seemed brighter. The others were looking at me, a mix of sympathy and understanding in their gazes. Mara told us we had crossed over, had changed something fundamental in us. But I didn't quite believe her until something absolutely extraordinary happened on the way back. As we walked, I spotted a flickering light deep within the trees. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, pulling me closer. "What is that?" I muttered, my heart pounding hard against my chest. Mara held me back, her expression serious. "Don't go there. That's not part of the transformation." But my feet seemed to move of their own volition. I felt a compulsion, a calling unlike anything I had experienced, despite Mara's warning lurking at the back of my mind. I stumbled into the clearing, the light intensifying around me, and that's when I saw it, a small, intricately carved mirror hanging from a low branch, glowing with an inner fire. The moment I reached for it, I felt a jolt of energy surge through my body, and the air grew thick and suffocating. I saw reflections that weren't my own, my future selves, branching off into a million possible lives. Each represented a choice I could make, a different path. But with every flicker, I also felt a profound emptiness, a weight of what could never be. I blinked, and the scene shattered around me. Suddenly, everything went dark. Panic surged within me, I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was falling through the void, and just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, I felt hands on me again, steady and sure. It was Mara and the group, pulling me back, reminding me that whatever existed in the mirror was an illusion, a distraction. I felt their strength envelop me, we were in this together. And just like that, I was back in the forest, the mirror fading away. I knew, in that moment, that my transformation wouldn't just be a solitary journey, it was an exploration of what it meant to coexist, to be part of something larger. Somehow embracing change often meant embracing others. That night I returned home, emotions swirling unsteadily within me, but instead of fear or sadness, I felt empowered. I started to rebuild my life actively instead of merely reacting. I reconnected with old friends, explored new activities, and even started a side project I had abandoned long ago. Change didn't happen overnight, but gradually, I noticed the world around me transforming alongside me. My vibrant imaginations of the future became a guiding beacon through mundane days, transforming how I interacted with others, leading me to dive deeper into life, myself, and even the darkness I once feared. But I'll never forget that ghost or the shimmering mirror, and something tells me the transformation is still ongoing. I know there's so much more ahead in this journey of change, but every day I wake up more willing to embrace it, and for that, I am eternally grateful. I may have entered that workshop seeking some scripted guide to transformation, and instead, I found raw truth in change itself, leading me on the adventure of a lifetime, one step, one glance, one terrifying leap into the unknown at a time. It was a bleak, rain-soaked evening when I found myself in a small, dimly lit coffee shop on the outskirts of town, a perfect setting for introspection or perhaps a good scare. I'd just finished my shift at the local diner, the clatter of plates and the hum of customers' chatter still echoing in my mind. I ordered a bitter cup of coffee, the kind that seemed to drain the very light from the room, and settled into a corner booth with my laptop, mostly to distract myself from the unsettling thoughts swirling in my mind. The usual crowd was absent, perhaps sheltering from the storm that battered the windows, but in the shadowy corners of the coffee shop, I noticed an older gentleman, his hair wild, beard unkempt, and eyes glimmering with a strange intensity that pulled me in like a lighthouse beacon in the fog. As the minutes turned into an hour, the rain fell harder, creating a rhythmic drumming against the glass that seemed to amplify the silence around us. I couldn't help but steal glances at him. He sat alone, occasionally stirring a murky cup of tea, and every so often, he'd mumble something that I couldn't quite catch. My curiosity piqued as I tried to focus on my work, but the allure of his solitude proved stronger. I found myself leaving my laptop open, half-finished, and venturing closer. It was an impulsive move, one that felt both reckless and intoxicating. "You look like you've got a good story to tell," I said, half-jokingly. The man looked up, fixed his gazes on me with those piercing eyes, and for a moment, the world around us disappeared. "You could say that," he replied, his voice raspy and low, as if he'd been holding on to secrets for longer than I could imagine. I hesitated, the conversation hanging in the air, and finally asked, "What's your story?" He hesitated only a moment before launching into a tale that felt like it had been carefully woven through the threads of time itself. Quickly, I lost track of the space and sound around us, utterly captivated. He began with his childhood, tales of laughter echoing through a bustling household, of loving parents who listened intently to every story he spun, no matter how trivial. I nodded, a part of me envious of the warmth in those memories, but the ambience shifted as the gentleman plunged deeper into his past, a darkness overshadowing his nostalgia. He spoke of how, as he grew up, he felt his voice gradually fading. School became a battlefield, where every attempt to connect would be met with mockery and indifference. There was something haunting in his recounting of moments when he would speak up, only to have his words drowned out by noise. I leaned forward, drawn into his melancholy. Each word resonated with me, as he described the slow disintegration of his ability to share, to express. He revealed that he had once been an aspiring writer, but the rejection letters piled up over time, and with each one, he felt smaller, lesser, words turned into a prison. My heart went out to him, and I found myself silently wishing I could take those moments back, give him the encouragement he so desperately craved. But there was one night, he continued, a flicker of light returning to his weary eyes. I was alone, on a bridge, the city sprawling beneath me, a million lives buzzing unaware of my existence. I was ready to let go, to silence everything forever. But then, I heard something. My stomach twisted in apprehension, urging me to listen closer. "A voice," he whispered, a soft voice carried by the wind. It wasn't just any voice, it was a woman's voice, singing. I turned, hoping to see her, but there was nothing. Just a cold breeze. Yet, that voice was full of such warmth, such depth. It wrapped around me like a blanket, and I realized, she was listening. She heard me in my silence. My breath caught as he spoke. Something deep within stirred, and I could feel tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, the intensity of his revelation washing over me. From that moment, he said, I grasped the power of listening. It's not just a passive act, it's an active investment in someone's story. The very act of truly listening can save a life. Each pause, each tremor in his voice, resonated with truth, yet there was something inexplicable about the way he looked past me, as if he could see all the people who had ever wandered through his life, each one a thread in the elaborate tapestry he was trying to weave. The coffee shop remained unchanged around us, time froze, and the storm outside grew more tumultuous, almost in harmony with the emotions we shared in that cloud of intimacy. I finally mustered the courage to ask, did you ever find her? The one who was singing. A shadow crossed his face, darkening his features. I never did. But her song stayed with me. It reminds me, everyone has a story, a heartbeat that deserves to be acknowledged. If we just listen. I could hardly breathe, the weight of his words settled within me, enveloping me in both sorrow and hope. And every so often, I find that if I listen hard enough, I can still hear her song. It was surreal. Just an old man sharing his burdens over bitter coffee, yet I felt like I was grasping the intangible threads of connection, the fabric of humanity itself. As he continued to unravel his life, I realized that my own fears and insecurities paled in comparison to the depths of his struggles. A reflection of our shared humanity shone brightly in that tiny, rain-soaked coffee shop. Hours passed like minutes, and I was transported away from my own worries, my job, my loneliness, my day-to-day drudgeries. Here was a man who had battled the silence, who had come to understand the beautiful act of listening and its power to unlock the darkest corners of despair. As the night wore on and the storm finally began to ebb, he paused and glanced at his watch. I should go, he murmured, as if he had just broken free from a spell. I felt the pull of reality returning like the tide rolling in, overwhelming with the rush of adrenaline and dread. Will I see you again? The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with the weight of unspoken words. Perhaps, he said softly, but remember this, my friend, never underestimate the power of listening. It can change lives. He rose and walked toward the exit, as if gravity had finally released him. I stared after him as he faded into the night, the bell above the door jingling softly. I sat in the coffee shop long after he left, a bittersweet ache filling my heart, the lonely quietness of the room echoing his parting words. It was true, I had spent my life so busy talking, sharing my own stories, drowning out the voices crying for attention. I was simply looking for someone to listen to me, while failing to see that the world was made richer by the stories of others. I finally closed my laptop, the words left untyped, an unspoken promise etched into my heart. The storm had let up. I stepped outside into the damp, crisp air, filled with renewed purpose. I began to walk, determined to carry forth the lesson I learned that night, to listen, to hear the songs of those around me. And as I strolled through the silent streets, the world pulsated with stories yet to be discovered. I would honor that gentleman's legacy, one heartbeat at a time. Little did I know, he had already begun to etch a significant mark on my life and perhaps the lives of others too, all by simply sharing his heartfelt moment and reminding me of the transformative power of listening. The day I realized the importance of self-reflection started like any other, with my alarm clock aggressively buzzing at 6 a.m. I hit snooze, rolled over, and returned to the comfort of sleep. Little did I know, this would be the day my life changed forever. I finally dragged myself out of bed around 7:15, groggy and disoriented. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The tired eyes staring back at me didn't reveal any hint of the strange events that were about to unfold. It was just an ordinary Thursday and, like most, I was preoccupied with my usual routine. I downed a cup of coffee, checked my phone, which was filled with notifications from social media. I mindlessly scrolled through the feed, absorbing the curated happiness of my friends and strangers alike. As I got dressed, I thought about how I'd been feeling off lately, a persistent cloud of anxiety hanging over me, overshadowed by a gnawing sense that I was missing something crucial in my life. Work was a blur, as it often was. I sat at my desk, filtering through emails, when I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Meet me at the park after work. You need to see this. My anxiety spiked at the unknown message, and my thoughts raced. Was it some well-meaning friend trying to help? Or something more sinister? Curiosity pushed me to keep the appointment. After a long, grueling day, I made my way to the park, a place that was usually filled with laughter and life but now felt heavy and ominous in the evening gloom. The air was thick with an impending storm. I scanned the area, spotting a figure in the distance, cloaked in shadow. As I got closer, I realized it was an old friend from high school, Sam, someone I had lost touch with over the years. He looked just as I remembered, except for the haunted look in his eyes that sent a chilling shiver down my spine. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice shaky. "I know this is weird, but I wouldn't have reached out if it wasn't important." I felt a knot tighten in my gut. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. Without a word, he handed me a small, ornate mirror that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. "I need you to look into it," Sam urged. "It's not just any mirror, it shows the truth of who you really are." I hesitated, staring at the reflective surface that looked too beautiful to belong in this park, too polished for the mundane reality surrounding us. In a moment of reluctant bravery, or stupidity, I took the mirror in my hands, feeling its cold weight. Looking into it, I expected to see my tired reflection, maybe even the anxiety scars etched upon my face. What I saw, however, was a horrifying distortion of my life's choices laid bare before me, all my regrets, my failures, and the people I'd hurt. Flashes of moments I'd buried deep appeared, my friend Miranda crying as I rejected her ideas, the way I had tossed aside my family when they needed me most, and the countless missed opportunities in my quest for superficial success. I stumbled back, gasping for air, the weight of it crushing me. Sam looked stricken, but also relieved, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You see it now, don't you? The mirror forces you to confront yourself, to face your past. Too many people refuse to look," he said. I dropped the mirror to the grass, feeling sick. "What does this even mean? Why show me this?" "Because," he replied softly, "we can't move forward until we understand where we've been." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized my life had been on autopilot. I had avoided self-reflection, comfortable in my ignorance, refusing to accept the cracks in my facade. We sat in silence as the clouds rolled in, a storm on the horizon matching the turmoil in my heart. Thunder rumbled, and with it came a storm of another kind. Memories flooded my mind, drowning me in the weight of guilt and regret. I thought of the people I had pushed away and the friendships I'd neglected out of selfishness. For the first time, I felt the hollowness of my existence, and it scared me. "It feels overwhelming, doesn't it?" Sam said, his voice penetrating my spiral. "But the important part is recognizing it. We can change if we allow ourselves to feel, to grow. Self-reflection isn't about punishment, it's about understanding." I had never thought of it that way. Underneath the anger I had felt for him reappearing in my life, there was a small flicker of hope. I wanted to make amends, to reach out to those I had wronged, to revive the missed opportunities. In that moment, something shifted within me, and I realized that acknowledging my faults was the first step toward healing. The first raindrops began to fall, patting against the ground, matching the rhythm of my heart. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the growing storm. "I needed this." Sam smiled, and for the first time, I felt a connection, a shared understanding. We got up, leaving the mirror behind, and started walking away from the park, as the sky opened up and unleashed a torrent of rain. As the storm washed over us, I felt something else begin to wash away, the fear of facing myself. The downpour mirrored the flood of feelings I had suppressed for so long. That day became a turning point in my life, a day of realization that self-reflection, uncomfortable as it might be, was vital for growth. Months have passed since then, and I've spent every moment striving to reconnect with the people I hurt, rebuilding friendships, and forging new paths. I finally prioritized self-care, taking the time to reflect on my choices and confront my inner fears. Now, as I watch the world spin outside my window, the rain has become a comfort. It's a reminder that embracing discomfort can lead to clarity and transformation. So, next time you look at your reflection, ask yourself what truly lies beneath. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones we hide within ourselves. Ignore them at your own peril. Aita for refusing to babysit for my rich sister without payment. It all started when my sister, Claire, called me out of the blue, sounding frantic. She and her husband, Tom, had a fancy gala to attend, and they needed a last-minute babysitter for their two kids, Noah and Mia. I could already hear the stress in her voice as she explained how they couldn't find anyone else. I considered it for a moment. After all, I love my niece and nephew, and they were usually a joy to be around. But then I remembered how Claire had always treated me like I was beneath her. She and Tom were wealthy, living in a sprawling mansion in an affluent neighborhood, while I was still renting a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet with my job as a graphic designer. They often flaunted their lifestyle, posting on social media about their extravagant vacations and designer clothes, while I had to watch my budget carefully. I hesitated, but the thought of my sister's desperation tugged at my heartstrings. I agreed to babysit, but I made it clear that I expected some form of compensation. "Claire, I'll help you out, but I think it's fair if you pay me something for the evening." "You know how busy I am," I said, trying to keep my tone light. There was a pause on the line, and then she let out a huff of frustration. "Really? You're going to make this about money? I thought we were family," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "It's not about that. I just think it's fair, especially since you guys can afford it," Claire sighed, and I could almost see her rolling her eyes. "Fine, I'll give you $100. Just be here by 6, she said reluctantly. I agreed, and as the day approached, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. On the evening of the gala, I arrived at Claire's house, and it was even more extravagant than I remembered. The kids were already in their pajamas, and Claire was frantically trying to finish getting ready. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," she said, shoving a $100 bill into my hand without making eye contact. I smiled and took it, trying not to think about how awkward this situation felt. "No problem, I'm happy to help." The night went surprisingly well. Noah and Mia were excited to see me, and we spent the evening playing games and watching cartoons. But as the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on the disparity between our lives. The kids were adorable, but I felt a twinge of resentment as I remembered the times Claire had belittled my financial situation. By the time Tom and Claire returned home, I was exhausted but felt proud of the evening we had spent together. I expected them to thank me, but when they walked in, Claire's first words were about how much fun they had at the gala. "Did the kids behave?" she asked, barely glancing my way. "Yeah, they were great," I replied, a bit deflated. I really enjoyed spending time with them. Claire waved her hand dismissively, still focused on Tom as they recounted their evening. I felt invisible, my presence hardly acknowledged. After a few minutes, they finally turned their attention back to me, and I decided it was time to address the payment. "So, about that $100, I started, but Claire interrupted me. "Oh, right, here you go," she said, pulling out a crumpled bill from her purse. "Thanks for taking care of them." I felt a rush of irritation as I took the money. I really appreciate it, but I was hoping for a little more. This was a long night. Claire's expression shifted. "You're seriously going to ask for more money? I thought we were family. You should be grateful I even offered you anything." My heart raced as I tried to stay calm. "I just think it's fair to value my time and effort. I could have spent my evening working on my projects." The tension in the room thickened, and Tom chimed in, his voice defensive. "You knew what you were getting into. You should be thankful for the opportunity to spend time with your niece and nephew. It's not like we asked you to babysit every week." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, their judgment weighing down on me. "I am grateful, but it's a job nonetheless. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can undervalue my time," I shot back, my frustration bubbling over. Claire crossed her arms, a look of disdain plastered across her face. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with money, you'd appreciate what family means," she retorted. "You know, not everything is about financial compensation. Some things should come from the heart." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I understand that, but I also work hard for my money. I can't just drop everything whenever you ask me to, and I think it's reasonable to expect to be compensated for my time." Claire scoffed, and the tension grew thicker. "So you're telling me that you're willing to let money ruin your relationship with your family?" I felt my stomach drop. "It's not about ruining relationships, Claire. It's about recognizing that my time is valuable too." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "If you want me to babysit again, we need to discuss payment first. It's that simple." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken resentment. "Whatever. If you're going to be this way, I don't need your help, Claire finally said, her voice cold. I can find someone else who isn't so focused on money. Good luck finding someone who cares about your kids as much as I do, I shot back, my voice sharper than intended. I stormed out of the house, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. The drive home was a blur, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let my sister's wealth and privilege get under my skin. As days turned into weeks, I struggled with the fallout. I didn't hear from Claire, and I felt torn. Was I wrong for wanting to be paid? A few weeks later, I found myself scrolling through social media, only to stumble upon a post from Claire. It was a picture of her family at a lavish vacation, captioned with how blessed they were to have each other. The comments were filled with praises about how wonderful they were. I felt a sharp pang of jealousy but also a tinge of relief that I had stood my ground. I spent the night thinking about my relationship with my sister. Should I reach out and apologize, or should I stick to my guns? I confided in a friend who suggested I let the dust settle. Family dynamics are complicated. Sometimes giving them space is the best thing, she said, and I took her advice. Weeks passed, and eventually, I received a text from Claire. Can we talk? It read, and I felt a rush of anxiety. I agreed to meet her for coffee, and as I sat across from her at the cafe, I couldn't help but notice how different she looked. There was a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. I'm sorry about how things went down, she started, her voice softer than I expected. I didn't mean to make it sound like I didn't appreciate your help. I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you. I just wanted to feel valued too, I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. Claire nodded, a hint of understanding in her eyes. I realize now that I took you for granted. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you weren't important. I just got caught up in the moment. We spent the next hour discussing everything from family to finances, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Claire admitted that her wealth sometimes created barriers between us, and I shared how it had made me feel small and undervalued. By the end of our conversation, we had reached an understanding. I'd still love for you to babysit when I need help, and I promise to pay you what's fair, she said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. And I'll make sure to respect your time more. I smiled back, feeling lighter. I'd like that. As I left the cafe, I realized that standing up for myself had created an opportunity for growth in our relationship. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about respect and understanding. Aita for refusing to babysit without payment? Maybe I was a little, but sometimes, standing my ground had brought us closer together. I never thought trying a new sport would lead me down a path I never expected, a path filled with thrills and a chilling discovery that still haunts my dreams. It all started innocently enough. I was sitting at home, scrolling through social media on a lazy Saturday afternoon, when an ad popped up for a new sport that had just emerged in my town, something called extreme underwater hockey. Now, I'd played regular hockey as a kid, and I loved swimming, so the idea of the two combined was strangely appealing. With a few clicks, I signed up for the introductory class, excited but nervous, hoping not to embarrass myself in front of strangers. Little did I know, this decision would change everything. The first session was surreal, an unlikely gathering of people in a massive pool, all clad in goggles, snorkels, and flippers. The instructor, a boisterous man named Jack, had this glint in his eye, a passion for the sport that was contagious. He explained the rules, filled us in on the history of the sport, and then promptly shoved us into the water. The initial excitement turned into a rush of pure joy as I zoomed around in the water, swiping the puck with my stick, laughter bubbles bursting from my lips. I had never felt so alive. As the weeks progressed, I found myself drawn deeper into this bizarre community. The practices were intense, but every drop of sweat was worth it. I was making friends, feeling stronger, and discovering a thrill I had long forgotten. Everything seemed perfect until one fateful night when we scheduled a match against a more experienced team. I was nervous and exhilarated. Under the glow of the fluorescent lights and shadows dancing against the tiled walls, we dipped into the pool, ready to prove ourselves. But the game took a bizarre turn. When I surfaced for air, needing a breather, I noticed one of the opposing team players wasn't just playing, he was fixated, staring into the depths of the water as if he was communicating with something down below. My instincts kicked in, and I swam closer, peering into the blue abyss. "What are you looking at?" I shouted, though water muffled my voice. He didn't respond, he merely gestured for me to look down. I couldn't resist. The deeper I looked, the more I thought I saw shadows swimming far below us, something that didn't belong. I blinked rapidly, willing myself to adjust to the murky depths, but the shadows curved away, darting out of sight, leaving an unsettling feeling in my stomach. As the game continued, I couldn't shake off the incredible sense of dread. My teammates were focused on the puck, oblivious to the whispers of danger lurking below. I tried to shake it off, to enjoy the game, but even as we won, a disquiet pervaded my thoughts. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the haunting feeling. The thrill had dimmed, and every time I submerged my body into the water, I felt those shadows pull at my consciousness. I became obsessed, attending practices and watching every match, hoping that by facing this fear, it would dissolve. One night, after a long session, I decided to explore it myself. I gathered diving gear, grabbed my snorkel and fins, and slipped into the water when no one was around. The feeling of immersion washed over me, but this time, it didn't feel thrilling, it felt heavy with anticipation. I descended into the darkness, kicking my legs, forcing myself deeper until I felt the chill seep into my bones. I kept searching, the water around me becoming darker, the silhouettes swirling around me. Then, I saw it, a large, shimmering shape, a creature, something unnatural that glimmered ominously. My heart raced. This wasn't a fish, it was too large, too defined, with a body resembling nothing I had ever seen. I panicked, trying to swim back up, but it was as if the water had begun to resist my every move. The dark figure drew closer, a maw opening, filled with an abyss of sharp teeth that sent ice-cold terror through my body. Those shadows weren't just shadows, they were something alive, something hungry. With every ounce of strength, I kicked upward, crashing into the surface, gasping for air. I crawled out of the pool, drenched and trembling, certain I had narrowly escaped something malevolent. But my obsession with the sport didn't fade, it grew, replaced by a fearful reverence. I initiated conversations with teammates, each of them sharing their own odd experiences, visions of shadows beneath the surface, whispers of ancient creatures that were said to guard the depths. I began to realize that I wasn't the only one affected, everyone felt it, a lure calling them deeper into the water. But it didn't just lure us, it demanded a price. One by one, my teammates vanished, they didn't show up for practices, and when I reached out to them, no one would respond. The sport that once filled me with exhilaration now left an overwhelming void, tinged with loss. Then came the day of the championship. I didn't want to play, yet I felt I had to. There was an electric buzz in the air, a sinister undertone laced through the excitement. Our coach had warned us about the strange tendencies of competitors, the strange drawing power of the waters. When the final whistle blew, something within me snapped. The urge to dive down and face whatever it was grew so fierce that I couldn't hold back. I slipped beneath the surface, pulling through the water until I saw it again, the creature lurking, this time its eyes, full of knowledge and hunger. I watched in horror as my fellow players started to appear, pulled under the weight of that ominous call. They were enchanted and terrified, just as I had been, but it was too late. This was not merely a sport, this was a seduction, and I was afraid I was next. I felt my consciousness slipping as I began to swim towards it, entranced by the depths, the allure too strong to resist. But as I neared that maw of darkness, something inside me screamed to survive. A surge of adrenaline jolted me back. I flipped in the water and swam with everything I had toward the surface. Halfway up, I could feel the darkness pulling at my legs, but I fought harder, bursting from the water like a cork, gasping for breath. My teammates hesitated, trapped between two worlds. I scrambled out, screaming for them, but they were lost. The pool became a waiting trap for all who dared to look deeper. Since that night, I haven't returned to the sport, yet I find remnants of it everywhere, shadows in my peripheral vision whenever I go near water, whispers in my dreams, and the longing to dive deeper, to face what lurks beneath the surface, though I know it's a path I can never take again. The time I tried a new sport and fell in love with it was the moment I turned my back on a beauty that was anything but innocent, and now its memory haunts me, an echo of choices made in the excitement of swimming with shadows. Even as I write this, I live in fear of the water, of what happened to my friends, and what the sport cost each of us. Whatever you do, don't let curiosity lead you into the depths, for not all passions are pure, and some discoveries may lead you to a darkness you can never escape. I never considered myself a strong person. In fact, I often felt like I was floating through life, always just on the periphery of everything, never really engaged. But that changed one night when I decided to take a hiking trip in the local woods, a place I'd grown up near but never truly explored. I thought it might be a fun escape from my monotonous routine. The woods were dense, ancient trees twisting together in a way that felt like a living labyrinth, whispering secrets I wasn't privy to. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and I decided to push further onto a path that felt too enchanting to abandon. After an hour of wandering, I stumbled upon an old cabin, its wooden walls weathered and covered in moss, as if it had been swallowed by the forest. Something about it pulled me in, a mix of curiosity and foolish bravery compelling me to explore its dark interior. I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of decaying wood. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. As I stepped deeper into the cabin, I noticed strange carvings on the walls, symbols and hieroglyphs that seemed to shift in the dim light. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a rustle coming from the far corner of the room. Panic surged as I turned, half expecting to see a wild animal or a lost hiker, but what I saw chilled me to the bone. A figure, tall and shadowy, emerged from the darkness. Its features were indistinct, cloaked in shadows. Fear gripped my heart, but instead of running, I felt an inexplicable urge to confront whatever this was. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice echoing in the stillness. The figure raised its hand, pointing to the symbols on the wall. Then, to my shock, it spoke, though its voice was a mere whisper that felt both distant and near. "You seek strength, yet you are lost. To find it, you must face your fears." Just then, the ground shook, and the cabin lurched around me. The shadows deepened. I was suddenly standing at the edge of a vast abyss, the cabin nowhere to be seen. I felt a crushing weight of isolation. My heart raced. I had to decide, would I jump into the unknown, or turn back, spiral again into the safety of ignorance? It was the first challenge. The silence around me was deafening, each moment stretching into infinity. I thought about my life, the self-doubt, the loneliness, the constant feeling of insignificance, and I realized that jumping into the void represented my deepest fears, my failures, the myriad reasons I felt weak. My heart pounded in my chest, but something else burned within me too, an ember of determination. I took a step toward the edge of the abyss, and my breath hitched in my throat. I edged closer, the unknown calling to me in a way I never anticipated. In that moment, I leapt, feeling the rush of air around me as I fell. But instead of plummeting into darkness, I began to rise. As I ascended, the air filled with colors, vivid reds and blues and greens, transforming the abyss into a breathtaking expanse of light. I was no longer afraid. I realized that embracing challenges head-on was my strength. I found myself soaring through this kaleidoscope, feeling freer than ever before. But the journey didn't stop there. I was set upon new trials, each infused with lessons that rang true. In one, I faced a storm, the skies turned dark, and winds howled. I stood my ground, feeling the power of resilience surge within me as I embraced the chaos. In another, I encountered a raging river, swift and treacherous, blocking my way. I had to find the courage to swim against the current, a task that left me breathless and exhausted, but I emerged victorious on the other side, every stroke strengthening my resolve. With each challenge conquered, I felt pieces of myself coming together, fitting into place like a puzzle I never knew existed. I realized that my strength wasn't in physical prowess but in my ability to confront fear, to embrace discomfort, and to push through obstacles. After what felt like a lifetime of trials, a final challenge awaited me, a mirror reflecting my deepest self. In its depths, I saw my insecurities, my failures, but also my potential, my growth, and all the battles I had fought. It was both haunting and liberating. As I gazed into the mirror, I understood that every hardship, every moment of doubt, had forged my identity, crafting a strength I would carry with me. In that instant, the shadowy figure returned, a faint smile on its featureless face. "You've learned well," it whispered. With those words, the mirror shattered, and I felt myself being pulled back into the woods. The cabin had vanished, leaving me standing alone among the trees as dawn broke, casting light through the leaves. My heart raced with the aftershocks of my journey. What had felt like an ordinary hike had transformed into a rite of passage. In conquering the unknown, I had awakened a strength I never knew existed, and the world around me seemed brighter, more vivid than ever before. I walked back, but now each step was a reminder of the empowerment I found in the face of fear. The ancient woods, with all their shadows and secrets, had led me to the most significant realization of my life, that strength isn't a physical attribute but a mental surge, a determination to rise through challenges. I left the woods that day forever changed, transformed by an experience rooted in both terror and triumph. I entered that cabin a lost soul, but I emerged with clarity, a tangible recognition of my potential. It's easy to dismiss fears as weaknesses, to retreat into our shells, but I now know that each challenge brings us closer to who we are meant to be. So, if you ever find yourself in the woods, lurking near shadows and echoes, remember, it is through the trials we face that we discover our true strengths. The journey is yours to take, embrace it, and you may find yourself soaring beyond your wildest dreams.